The internet exploded with one headline: Can Yaman detained in Istanbul? But when Spanish media finally sat down with him and asked direct questions, his answers told a very different story. In this video, I'm going through what he was asked, how he answered, and what those answers actually reveal when you slow everything down. Subscribe because this part of the story was almost completely ignored. Let's start where the interview starts. The first thing the interviewer does is establish context. Not rumors. Not social media noise. They ask a simple question. Why were you in Istanbul? John Yaman answers calmly. He says he was there during a personal break. Not for work. Not for promotion. Not for any public appearance. That detail already matters more than people realize. Because once you remove work and promotion from the equation, the assumptions around behavior and visibility change completely. He then describes Istanbul in emotional terms. He doesn't describe it as dangerous. He doesn't describe it as chaotic in a negative sense. He talks about intensity, energy, a city that gives strong feelings. This framing is important because it shows familiarity. He's not talking about a place he doesn't understand. He's talking about a place he knows. Then the interviewer moves to the moment everyone is actually curious about. The police operation. The question is asked directly, without dramatization. What happened that night? John doesn't deny the detention. He doesn't avoid it. He explains that there was a large police operation connected to nightlife venues across the city. Not a single club. Not a targeted arrest. A wider operation. In that context, he was briefly detained and then released the same day. He doesn't embellish. He doesn't minimize. He simply states it. And then something interesting happens. The interviewer doesn't jump to accusations. Instead, they ask about awareness. Were you warned before going? John answers yes. He says he was told that the atmosphere was tense. That things weren't calm. Especially at night. This is a key moment in the interview. Because this is where the narrative could go one of two ways. Either this shows recklessness, or it shows awareness. And John makes it clear which one it is. The interviewer asks the obvious follow-up. So why did you go anyway? And his answer is short but heavy. Because I had nothing to hide. That sentence does a lot of work. He doesn't say, I wasn't afraid. He doesn't say, I didn't care. He says he had nothing to hide. That's not bravado. That's confidence in context. Then the interviewer brings up the headlines. The words that were used. The accusations that spread. And this is where John becomes more analytical. He doesn't attack anyone personally. He doesn't name outlets. He questions logic. He asks how realistic it is to believe that someone would openly engage in illegal behavior during a period when police are actively arresting people across the city. This isn't emotional defense. It's reasoning. And then he adds the sentence that quietly dismantles the entire scandal narrative. If there had been even a small truth to those claims, he would not have been released so quickly. That line is critical. Because it introduces something the headlines ignored. Procedure. Legal systems don't work on vibes. They work on steps. And quick release after a large operation usually means one thing. No case. The interviewer doesn't push back on this. And that's telling. Instead, the conversation shifts. They move on to his work. Del Turco. To Spain. That transition matters more than people realize. Because interviews are not edited randomly. If there were unresolved legal issues, this part of the conversation would not exist. As the interview continues, John talks about how stories change when they travel, especially across borders. He explains that once a dramatic version appears, gets repeated without verification, not because of malice, but because of speed. This is where his frustration shows. Not with what happened, but with how it was told. He points out that foreign media, in particular, often repeat what they see without checking local context. And that's the core issue. Because context is everything in situations like this. Then the interviewer asks about consequences. Did this affect your schedule? John answers clearly. Well, his appearances continued as planned. Promotional commitments stayed intact. There were no cancellations. This is not a small detail. In the entertainment industry, schedules are sensitive. If there is risk, projects pause. They didn't. And that silence is loud. Because platforms don't gamble on unresolved controversy. They wait. Here they didn't. As the interview wraps up, there's something consistent about John's tone. It never changes. Before the headline moment, during the explanation, afterward, same language, same framing, same facts. That consistency matters more than any single quote. When stories fall apart, details shift. Here they didn't. So when you step back and look at the full interview, a very clear picture forms. Personal visit, a large police operation, a brief procedural detention, fast release, no charges, no aftermath. What followed wasn't a legal story. It was a media one. And media stories grow fastest when repetition replaces verification. This isn't unique to this situation. It happens often. But this case is a good example of why slowing down matters. Because once you actually listen to the questions and answers, the drama disappears. What's left is context. And context changes everything. So now the question isn't, what happened in Istanbul? The question is, how did the story become something else? And that's what I want to ask you. After hearing John's answers, slowly in full, does this feel like a scandal? Or does it feel like a moment that was reshaped by headlines? Tell me what you think in the comments.